Thanks, Radwan, and thanks, Mr. Kilani. I think I will just try to respond to what Mr. Kilani was saying, and also your question, Radwan, about what happened, why we are moving from a justice system that resisted or that acted as a check on the president's power grab to a system or a judiciary that is now being used as a tool of repression. So what happened during these 20 months that moves us from a situation in which the higher judicial council in 26th of July was saying that exceptional measures cannot be used in relation to the judiciary, that the office of prosecutor was independent, the judiciary was independent, to a situation now in which judicial institutions are subordinated to the executive, and the judiciary and the prosecutor's office are used as a tool of repression in terms of targeting political opponents, journalists, human rights defenders, and activists. I think what happened can be structured around two steps. The first step was the dismantling of all the guarantees related to the independence of the judiciary. I will specify here just comparing the 2014 Constitution and the 2022 Constitution. 2014 Constitution provided for the office of the prosecutor to be independent. It provided for the higher judicial council to be independent, composed of majority of judges who are elected by their peers. It provided for military court jurisdiction to be restricted to military offenses. Most of the legislation that should have implemented these constitutional guarantees were not implemented over the past 7 or 8 years until the power grab of 25th of July. But without these guarantees related to the independence of the prosecutor's office or the jurisdiction of military courts or the independence of the higher judicial council, the Constitution of 2014 and some legislations, including the law on the higher judicial council, provided for a system that allowed for the institution itself, for the judiciary itself, to be independent institutionally and to not be subordinated to the executive. And historically, the higher judicial council in Tunisia was presided by the President of the Republic. The Vice President was the Ministry of Justice, and the judiciary as an institution and as a system was subordinated to the executive. What the 2014 Constitution established, what the uprising of 2011, 2010, 2011 established, is a judicial system with sufficient guarantees that can act independently without interference from the judiciary. On the 25th of July, the president was clear about his intention. He declared himself to be the chief prosecutor, the head of the prosecutor's office. You don't declare that just out of nothing. If you want to be the head of prosecutor's office, is that you have a clear idea what the prosecutor's office should be or the role of the prosecutor should be. And if you go back to all the statements by the president over the past 20 months, prosecutor's office serves in the framework that's provided for by the president to initiate proceedings against those who are suspected of opposing the president. A concrete example, when the members of the parliament met online, defying the closure of the parliament by the military charge and military personnel, the president summoned the Ministry of Justice and ordered her to initiate criminal prosecutions against the members of the parliament based on charges of conspiracy against the state. And most of the investigative judges and prosecutors at the time that were receiving such orders, they refused to comply with them, and they refused to initiate such criminal prosecutions against judges. It's not surprised that those prosecutors and judges, investigative judges, were removed or are part of those judges who were removed from office by the president. So that's about prosecutor's office. The higher judicial council as an institution, it resisted the power grab in true statements. It resisted the subordination of the judiciary as a whole to the president and to the executive in general. It refused some draft decrees, or at least declared some draft decrees that the president developed, in particular the one on penal reconciliation, found them to be unconstitutional and illegal. And because they consistently say no to the president initiated a smear campaign against the members of the High Judicial Council, suspended their financial allowances, and then dissolved the Higher Judicial Council altogether and re-established a new temporary Higher Judicial Council that is totally subordinated to him, that is not based on election, but rather on appointments, and all the members are appointed either directly or indirectly by the president, indirectly when they are ex officio members. And because of such subordination at the institutional level, we have now a temporary Higher Judicial Council that is failing to act in defense of the judges and the prosecutors who are being subject to arbitrary criminal and disciplinary proceedings. We have also Higher Judicial Council who is silent when such criminal prosecutions and politicized judicial proceedings are initiated against the president's perceived opponents. The Higher Judicial Council is just condoning such initiatives. So the dismantling of these guarantees of independence, both at the prosecutor's level or the judiciary level, the Higher Judicial Council level, led to a situation in which the justice system can be used as a tool of repression. So how it has been used as a tool of repression? I think the repression didn't start with the arrests of the opposition members. For those of us who have been following up a little bit, these criminal proceedings, I think it started with the judges and prosecutors themselves. So this is the resistance that was the question about. Over the past summer, 49 judges and prosecutors had a decision or judgment from the administrative courts that reinstate them, that found that arbitrary dismissal by the president through Decree 35, that dismissal was arbitrary. And it was arbitrary because for months, the administrative courts asked both the president and the Ministry of Justice to provide any evidence that those judges who were arbitrarily dismissed were involved in any kind of disciplinary or criminal misconduct. And both the presidents, or the institutions of the president and the Ministry of Justice failed to provide such evidence. And because of the failure to provide such evidence, the administrative court issued that decision and reinstated 49 of them. Instead of enforcing that decision by the administrative court, the Ministry of Justice just initiated politicized criminal prosecutions against these judges. Now, I can give concrete examples about what do we mean by the prosecution of judges and prosecutors. And again, just to highlight that among the 57 judges and prosecutors that were dismissed, there was the former president of the Higher Judicial Council, former president of the Judiciary Council, the president of the Appeal Court in Tunis, president and the general prosecutor and prosecutor of the Tribunal of First Instance in Tunis, and the Dean of the Investigative Judges in Tunis, in addition to other judges and prosecutors. So some concrete examples of the politicized criminal proceedings against these prosecutors and judges. There is a deputy prosecutor right now who is charged with establishing a terrorist enterprise based on a complaint by a police officer against him. The charge is based on the claim that the deputy prosecutor refused to issue a search warrant in a terrorism-related case. Police officer is accusing him of obstructing his work and not complying with his demand. And that deputy prosecutor right now is subject to criminal prosecution and is charged with terrorism-related charges. Another prosecutor is being prosecuted because, again, based on a complaint by security officials who accused the deputy prosecutor of being prejudiced against him. Another is prosecutor based again on a security report by police officers who said that judge is associated with the suspicious group relation to terrorism. And I think in those three cases, when you look at the case files, when you talk to the lawyers of those judges or prosecutors, there is nothing there that substantiates any of the claims or the charges against them apart from these police reports or these police complaints. And to highlight here that it is the role of prosecutor to assess the evidence and to decide whether or not he or she should issue a warrant arrest, and it's not the other way around. It's not the police who should be controlling the work of prosecutors. the former president of the Higher Judicial Council, who was accused by the president of being corrupt, together with other members of the Higher Judicial Council, is being prosecuted, again, based on terrorism-related charges, joining terrorist enterprise, establishing terrorist enterprise, again, based on a complaint by another judge who were dismissed by the former Higher Judicial Council. And you look again at the case files and you talk to the judges, the lawyers of these judges, and there is nothing there that can support or substantiate any of the accusation against these judges. But it's not only the judges, it started with the judges. And this is where we started seeing, at least in the Tunisia after the revolution, that cases are being looked at, not based on the law, or cases are initiated or prosecutions are initiated and continued, not based on the law, not based on the evidence, but based on the instructions that these prosecutors or judges who are initiating these cases are receiving either from the Ministry of Justice or sometimes even from the president. And here it's important to highlight that the president himself clearly stated that those who liberate or those who discharge the accused are complicit in their case and complicit with the accused. And I think when we started with the judges, then it became just easier for them, for the judiciary that is now subordinated to the president, to initiate such criminal cases against opposition leaders and against activists and journalists. And I will focus just on two cases because I know that's running a bit behind in terms of time in relation to the implementation of Decree 54. Decree 54, again, initiated, adopted by the president, as it's been the case with all the decrees that were adopted over the past 20 months without any consultation, without any democratic legitimacy, and establishing that anyone who is publishing false information by any means can be punished by between 5 to 10 years imprisonment, 10 years imprisonment if the person who is the subject of such false information is a public official. Based on this decree, we had cases of individuals, lawyers, for example, lawyer Mahdi Zakrouba, who is prosecuted based on Article 24 of Decree 54, based on a complaint by the Ministry of Justice, because this lawyer criticized the politicization of judicial proceedings against the judges. We have a student who published something on Facebook in relation to the protests in the city of Tadamon, who is also prosecuted based on Decree 54, publication of false information. And we have the business news, a media company, their director is again being prosecuted based on Article 24 of Decree 54 because of publication of an article that the head of the government deemed to be critical of her work as a head of government. So to summarize, I think when we look at how we went from a judiciary that was, or at least judicial institutions that were acting as a check on the president in the early days of the power grab, to a situation in which we have these politicized judicial proceedings and in which both the prosecutor's office and the judiciary as a whole are being used as a tool of oppression, we have to look at it in terms of the dismantling of the institutional guarantees of judicial independence. And because of the dismantling of such guarantees, we are reaching a situation right now in which the administration of justice is not based on the law, is not based on evidence, it is based rather on political considerations and political instructions. Thank you.